the ability to have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for. You know, people don't change that much. I think they recognize those people whose commitment has been...
A folded silk scarf, a drawer that's stuck on the runners, and underneath, a small velvet case that should not have existed in that room. Princess Anne opened it on a quiet Tuesday afternoon at Clarence's house. Inside sat an emerald bracelet that the royal collection had marked as lost since 1997. Diana's bracelet, hidden inside Camilla's private dressing room. Anne did not shout. She did not call for guards. She lifted the emeralds to the light. Hit subscribe if this is your kind of thing. Stay with me because the end of this story changes everything you know about the modern monarchy. A number that did not match. The afternoon began with paperwork, which is perhaps the least glamorous way to introduce a royal scandal. Yet it is the most accurate description. The household had opened a new review of private possessions, and during this process, a catalog number was found to be incorrect. One line on a single page did not match the object it was supposed to describe. This is how the most significant issues within the family tend to erupt. Never with a sudden confession, but always with a mismatched number. Anne was the obvious choice for this task. Everyone in the building knew it. She consistently ranks at the top of the royal engagement list each year. She does the heavy lifting that often goes unnoticed, and importantly, has no personal stake in the outcome. Not being in line for the crown or entitled to the grand estates, she has spent her entire adult life as the family member willing to voice the uncomfortable truths. I focus my efforts on sifting through the quiet filings, the inventories, and the records that are often amended without fanfare. What you are about to hear is my attempt to piece the story together. A catalog number was found to be wrong, and the household assigned the job to Anne. No one in that building anticipated where this would lead. The mismatched number guided her down a quiet corridor and into a dressing room that only one person typically uses. Camilla was out that afternoon, leaving the rooms in eerie silence. Big houses become completely still when their occupants are elsewhere, making every footstep on the floorboards seem louder than it should. Anne approached the vanity, a heavy oak piece, and pulled open a stuck drawer. After some effort, she managed to open it, revealing a folded silk scarf inside. Beneath it, she discovered a velvet case, the repaired clasp, and the old label. Anne opened the case and the bracelet inside caught the light. It was adorned with emeralds, gold, and diamonds, featuring a clasp that had a highly specific repair. That repair holds the entire story. Years before she died, Diana broke that clasp during a family evening. Afterwards, she had it mended. The repair is visible if you know exactly where to press your thumb. Anne knew. She had been in the room the night the clasp broke. As she pressed her thumb against the gold, she felt the join. At that moment, every innocent explanation fell away. This was not a similar piece from the same jewelry maker, nor was it a clever copy. This was the exact bracelet. Underneath the case, folded completely flat, Anne discovered an old inventory label with Diana's initials written on it. The date stamped on it was years before Camilla had ever been crowned anything. That single detail transforms the entire situation from a mere embarrassment into something deeply deliberate. Whoever placed that case in that drawer knew exactly what was inside it. Nobody hides something they haven't identified. The label had accompanied the emeralds, and someone had kept them together, locking both under a silk scarf. Anne placed the bracelet in her coat pocket, closed the empty velvet case, locked the drawer, and walked out into the hallway. She gave the security officer in the corridor a very brief instruction. Nobody enters this room. Not the household, not the staff, not the Queen. When an aide asked her whom they should call, she provided just one name, Charles. Before the king had even left his desk, word reached Camilla that someone had been in her drawer. Remember this, you now know what Anne found and where she found it, but you do not yet know how it got there or what else was in that room. Both of those answers are forthcoming, with the second being significantly worse than the first. Consider what the bracelet represents to each person involved in this story, as it is viewed as four completely different objects depending on the observer. To the collection, it is merely a line on a page, emeralds and gold. To Anne, it's a memory of a family dinner, a broken clasp, and Diana laughing as she held the two ends together in her palm. For Camilla, it is something she has never explained to anyone. And for Charles, It is a heavy door he has spent 30 years leaning against. Anne and Diana were never close. This is not mere gossip. It is a settled historical record. They were two women bound by nothing more than a surname shared through marriage. One lived at the forefront of every camera in Europe, while the other went out of her way to avoid that attention. They were polite but were not friends. That is precisely why this matters. Anne did not pick up that bracelet out of sentimentality. She has no warm memories of Diana to defend. She picked it up because it had a name on the label, and that name was not Camilla's. Someone had taken a deceased woman's property, altered the paperwork, and kept it. Anne made a phone call and sealed a door. The falsified conservation record. Charles entered the room briskly, asking to see the bracelet before he had even finished sitting down. He held it under his desk lamp, turning it over with his thumb. He discovered the repair just as his sister had, indicating he was aware of it too. He set the bracelet down on the blotter and said nothing. Anne observed every moment of his reaction. His silence was the worst possible answer. A denial would have shown a firm stance. Confusion would have indicated uncertainty. Instead, Charles gave her pure recognition. Recognition meant he understood what the bracelet was. Worse, it seemed he immediately grasped why finding it in that particular drawer could tear the family apart. Meanwhile, Camilla was 2 rooms away, halting midway through removing her gloves. She asked a senior aide if Anne had taken anything from her dressing room, but the aide could not answer. He did not know. Her expression changed. No one has recorded that specific afternoon in any official documentation, and nobody involved ever will. I am piecing together this account from the substantial paper trail that emerged afterward, and from how those who work in that household describe a day like this one. Consider the next few minutes my definitive interpretation of events. When Anne checked the main collection register, the bracelet was listed there, accompanied by a small handwritten note stating that the item had been removed for specialist conservation. However, the jewelry workshop mentioned in that entry never received it. Anne had someone call them to check the old logs. There was no record, no delivery slip, no job number, nothing. Someone had written a blatant lie into the royal register, and then the object vanished. Charles cleared the room of everyone except his sister, asking her to avoid Camilla until she had heard the full history. Anne told him she would not make any promises. That history begins on a single terrible evening at Kensington Palace, the autumn after Diana died. The bracelet did not simply drift out of the collection over the years. It went missing on one specific night in one specific room, where every object had been accounted for, and every person entering the door had been documented. To understand this story, it's crucial to recognize what happens to a royal's belongings after they pass away. The household conducts what it calls a memorial inventory. A team meticulously goes through the private possessions, object by object. They photograph each item, label it, and determine what stays with the family and what goes into the wider collection. Every object receives a number. This process is the reason this story exists. In 1997, someone wrote William's name on a label, and 27 years later, that label remained in the drawer with the emeralds. It was the one thing the people who moved it could not make disappear. The sorting room and the green envelope. Imagine yourself in that building for a moment. The timing is significant. The flowers outside the Kensington gates were still piled high. The country had just witnessed 2 young boys walking behind a coffin through central London. Inside the house, while all that raw grief unfolded, a team of people with clipboards worked through her wardrobes and jewelry boxes, writing numbers on labels. Someone has to do it. This is perhaps the least human thing that occurs after a death. During this review, the emerald bracelet was photographed, labeled, placed into a velvet case, and designated for William, clearly marked with his name. Later that evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Camilla entered the sorting room. She inquired about why certain pieces were being permanently reserved for Diana's sons. Charles replied flatly that the bracelet was not hers to discuss. Camilla responded with a statement documented by a former official, saying that Diana's possessions would continue to control this family until someone finally decided where the past should end. Charles ordered the remaining staff out of the room, trying to prevent a significant argument from escalating through the household by morning. In doing so, he created the exact opposite effect. He cleared out the only room where a witness might have been present, making a decision that cost his son a bracelet for nearly 30 years. He instructed that the remaining boxes be moved overnight into a private storage suite managed by his own household. By morning, the velvet case with William's name on it was gone. Nobody raised an alarm. Charles assumed the item was secure. Years later, that assumption feels less like trust and more like a man deliberately choosing not to look. Anne went through the copied register page with a pencil and discovered the discrepancy. The original wording stated "Reserved for Prince William," but someone had crossed it out and written "Removed for Specialist Conservation." The handwriting belonged to a former aide who later took a position in Camilla's private office. Anne placed the old inventory photograph next to the bracelet on the desk. It had the same repaired clasp and identical emerald stones in the same arrangement. She pushed the falsified register across the table to her brother and waited. An aide entered and announced that the Queen wanted access to her dressing room. Anne refused, stating that Camilla could not enter that room until she came to stand in front of her first. The paperwork detailed how the bracelet had been handled. Only one person in that building could explain why it was still sitting under a scarf decades later. The library confrontation. There were no advisors present. No private secretary wrote anything down. No formal language softened the tension. Anne entered the King's library holding an open velvet case. Camilla was already there, standing next to Charles. Anne placed the bracelet on the table in front of them and looked at Camilla. She asked a direct question that made it impossible for Camilla to leave politely. "Diana's bracelet. Your locked drawer. Explain that to me." Charles chose the library because he believed being alone, with no staff, would contain the potential scandal. He worried about the seriousness of the situation. A conflict over a dead princess's jewelry involving the current queen, now becoming public. Anne did not sit down. This was not merely about rivalry between two women. It was about a specific item, a changed royal record, and a locked drawer. Camilla first responded with a reasonable answer. She explained that the bracelet had been entrusted to her during several household moves because Charles feared it would disappear among the many boxes. She insisted she had kept it safe, not stolen it. Anne kept her voice calm. Those who have worked with her know that she doesn't raise her voice, which makes her questions more pointed. She asked why, if the intention was to protect it, it needed to be in a personal drawer under a scarf instead of being kept in the secure logged archive. Then she slid the falsified inventory entry across the table and asked who approved it. When Camilla reached for the emeralds, Anne shut the case with a sharp motion, and the loud noise echoed through the quiet library. "It was never yours to keep," Anne stated. Charles finally spoke, shaking the foundation beneath his wife. He clarified that he never told her to keep the bracelet indefinitely. His instruction had only been to secure the inventory during the transfer, not to keep it for years. Camilla then broke down and admitted why she had kept it. She had found a note from Diana in a green envelope, asking for the bracelet to be given to her son before his wedding. Charles reacted strongly, asking why he had never seen that note. Camilla offered a painfully honest explanation. Diana's request would have disrupted another important moment for the family, a wedding, by reminding everyone of Diana's presence in handwriting. Camilla feared the impact that would have. Anne remained still and said the bracelet was only part of the issue. She needed the note, the original inventory, and the names of everyone who helped conceal both. Camilla admitted to hiding information, which revealed a deeper problem. One person can hide a bracelet, but a group can conceal its history for 27 years. Anne ran an investigation because Charles asked her to. She requested every inventory page and security entry. The situation became tense quickly. Camilla had her own private staff while Charles controlled the official records. Anne had significant authority in her review. The review discovered the green envelope, delivered to Camilla's private secretary just 2 days after the memorial inventory at Kensington. Next to it on the transfer record, there was an instruction, "Retain privately," with the Queen's initials. That evening, Charles signed a custody order, transferring the disputed property from Camilla to a neutral official. All items linked to Diana were taken out of Camilla's control. Before anyone informed her, Camilla's staff found 3 storage rooms already locked. The enforcement of these changes was immediate and quiet. A security officer stood outside a private archive, and a long-serving aide was asked to surrender an access card. 3 doors were sealed under the King's direct authority. For the first time since becoming queen, Camilla approached a door in a royal residence that would not open for her. She tried her card, but it didn't work. She tried again, but it still refused her access. There was no dignified way to stand in a corridor while a man in a suit watched her struggle. She asked if Charles had personally approved the restriction. The officer replied that the King's order could not be overridden. This was the moment the dynamics within that house changed forever. A woman who had spent 30 years gaining access to that building now stood outside one of its doors, unable to enter. The return to William in daylight. Anne and Charles found a green envelope with Diana's handwriting. It had William's name on the front, and the wax seal was broken. Charles felt guilty and exhausted. He feared another public argument, so he avoided looking for the letter. Anne told him the bracelet in the drawer wasn't the main issue. The real issue was that he had let Diana's memory become a problem he avoided. She took the envelope in the velvet case and went to find William. William read the letter aloud in a room with his father and aunt. Diana wrote that the emerald bracelet should go to him before he got married. She wanted him to decide what to do with it. She believed a 15-year-old boy could make that decision. She expected someone would give him the letter. He got married in front of billions, while his mother's letter about the wedding stayed locked away, marked with someone else's initials. William's voice broke as he read. Charles reached for him. The king said, "The bracelet belongs with your family. Your mother's wish is what matters most." William found it hard to forgive. He told his father that regret couldn't bring back lost time. But he also didn't want to use the bracelet against his father. He did not want to spend the next 30 years repeating the same painful cycle. He wanted to talk to Catherine. The bracelet had returned, bringing the truth with it. The next choice was still open. That choice turned a locked drawer into the most photographed wrist in Britain. By the next morning, Buckingham Palace lost control of the story, as often happens. News got out. The palace issued a statement confirming that a personal item belonging to Diana had been returned to the Prince of Wales. The statement noted that the Queen no longer controlled items related to Diana. Catherine received the bracelet in private. William placed the velvet case next to a letter and waited for her to read it. She asked if he was sure he wanted her to wear it so soon. If they kept it hidden, they could keep it a secret. Wearing it in public might be seen as a challenge to Camilla. He told her it was not about revenge. His mother wrote down her wishes for it. Following her wishes 30 years later wasn't an attack. Keeping it hidden would continue what started in the locked drawer. Catherine fastened the repaired clasp. She left for a children's charity meeting at Kensington Palace, where Diana had lived and where her sons grew up. A large crowd had gathered. Catherine stepped out of the dark car and waved to the crowd. The sleeve of her tailored coat moved back a bit, revealing the emeralds for the first time since Diana wore them. For a few seconds, the crowd was silent. Then the applause began and didn't stop. Within 20 minutes, the image was everywhere. A London paper dedicated its front page to a photo of a raised hand and wrist with the words, "Diana's emeralds come home." The crowd outside the gates figured it out before the newsrooms. People there realized what they were looking at. You can hear it on the amateur footage. Someone says bracelet, someone else says Diana, and then the excitement grows. Flowers started to appear against the famous railings by the afternoon. Broadcasters spent the evening discussing it. They didn't call it just jewelry. They called it a promise from a mother to a son, finally arriving decades late. It was a gift to a family his mother never met. Camilla watched the replay alone in her sitting room. When the commentator mentioned where the bracelet had been found, she turned off the television. Charles called Anne, William, and Camilla for a final meeting. The king read the formal conclusion. The bracelet was removed without proper approval, falsely listed for conservation, and kept privately for 27 years, against a written instruction from its owner. Camilla spoke, saying fear and jealousy influenced her decisions about the bracelet. She thought hiding it would lessen the past's power. Instead, it allowed the past to grow in a locked drawer. Anne only said one thing in that meeting. She reminded everyone that the household put her in charge of the inventory because they thought nothing was left to find. The bracelet sat under a scarf because everyone believed no one would bother to look. The final ruling is permanent. Camilla has no future role in anything related to Diana, the jewelry, the letters, or her legacy. That door is now closed forever. William picked up the velvet case and carried it out. Catherine will wear the bracelet on family occasions. After that, it goes to Charlotte, keeping it in the line Diana intended. None of this completely fixes what happened. The drawer is now empty. The record is corrected. The beautifully repaired emerald bracelet has finally reached the address written on the original label. Camilla spent nearly 30 years hiding the bracelet. She rightly feared it. Once it appeared on another woman's wrist, the country understood exactly what she had done. The silk scarf didn't protect her, and the heavy lock failed to keep it safe. Princess Anne opened one drawer one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and 30 years of careful work collapsed in about 4 seconds.